Jonathan, what issues with reference to selecting a business form? And as I recall in California, if you're operating with more than one person, you've got the partnership, the general partnership, the limited partnership, the limited liability company, referred to as an LLC, and the corporation, of which there are two tax varieties, C&S, and a statutory closely held corporation, and a regular corporation. Now, that's a lot of vocabulary, and it requires the client to do a lot of thinking, but why don't you provide our listening audience with some of the issues that they should consider, not only in selecting a business form, but thinking about operating the business?
Well, I think the complexity of the business, the dollars of volume associated with it, the number of employees, all of those things go into the question. Sometimes I've had clients who come to me and say, well, they think they should incorporate, and that they've been told by somebody else they should do that. And I say, well, why do you think that's necessary? And they say, well, it looks more professional. And I say, well, there's a cost and there's trouble associated with doing it, so there should be good reasons behind it. And when I've had situations in which I've had litigation or a lawsuit against somebody where they have personal assets and they have corporate assets, one of the important questions is whether they've operated the corporation properly and whether or not they have taken steps to take care of the liabilities that the business may incur. So for example, when I had a person who had a claim against somebody and the business had gone bankrupt, and my client would drive by the office of the business every day on his way to work and see the Land Rover parked out in front and said, how come we can't get the Land Rover? And I would say, well, unfortunately the Land Rover is personal property and that's not part of the business. So some of it I think has to do with how much money you have just in your pocket to spend on legal fees and on setting up a business. Some of it has to do with whether or not you're going to take out insurance and have assets sufficient to satisfy the liabilities that that business may incur. One of the other entities we didn't talk about is an LLP, which is a limited liability partnership under California law. For doctors, lawyers, accountants, you'll often see the business name and then it'll have the letters LLP after it. And there are additional requirements for somebody to be, or an entity to be, a limited liability partnership. But the basic notion is liability protection. It's one of the benefits of California law that if you set it up properly and you operate it properly, the claims that are incurred in the operation of that business will be limited to the assets of that business. And so while in relation to tax problems they talk about the distinction between tax evasion and tax avoidance, I think that there are steps you can take as a business to protect your personal assets which are legitimate as compared to those which aren't. For example, when your business is going down the tubes and you're worried about your personal asset and you start quit claiming assets to your ex-wife or to your dog or to your other people. And those are generally considered transfers which are fraudulent in an attempt to avoid creditors. So I think that one of the questions is what kind of business you're operating, how complex that business is, how many people there are involved in the operation of the business, and some of the other, and I'm not a tax person, and I strongly suggest to people that if they're looking at the tax ramifications associated with operating a business, they talk to an accountant or a tax attorney.
One of the things that a person who's going into business should look at is whether they can limit their liability for business activities to the business itself. And so certainly that's something you want to confer with your lawyer to ascertain what business form best provides limited liability for your business activities, but at what cost and how is it maintained?
Yeah, and I haven't checked recently, but I think the minimum franchise tax board fee to the state associated with being a corporation every year is just under $1,000. And there's a cost associated with keeping meeting minutes, doing other things. You have to have a separate bank account for the corporation. There's a variety of ways. For a while there in construction, they had what were called disadvantaged business enterprises and women-owned business enterprises. And for example, I had a client who said he was set up as a corporation. What if he transferred more than 51% of the shares to his wife so that it would then be a woman-owned business enterprise, which would have certain preferences in bidding? And I said, well, there could be some advantage with that, but most of the public entities that care about that are also checking pretty carefully to make sure that it really is being operated by a woman and that she's just not a figurehead.